नमस्ते दोस्तों, वापस एक बार मैं दीप गजबे और आपके लिए आज बहुत ही जबरदस्त, मजबूत और पावरफुल पर्सनालिटी को आपके लिए लेके आए हैं। इंपीरियल मनी में आप बहुत कुछ यूनिक देखेंगे आज। एंड देन वी हैव मिस्टर विकास नंदा। ही इज रन द कंपनी, इज द को-फाउंडर ऑफ ग्लोबलाइज, जैसे कि आप बैनर पे देख रहे होंगे विकास सर। So, sir is having a very powerful profile, as you know that he's a 30 years rich experience. He's having the financial services industry, and Vikas sir is providing the strategic direction, and he's actually leading the entire company at this point of time, globalized per se. Sir, इसके पहले ड्यूश बैंक में थे. He was the managing director there. He was handling the programs of from the CEO office. Sir was into IBM also, and he was heading the he was the executive vice president and handling the all financial services business, handling the solutions business. And he is having the amazing and a very rich experience in the entire system out of it. ही सर ने जो अभी ग्लोबलाइज चालू किया, इसके बारे में हम लोग बहुत सारी बातें समझेंगे, सीखेंगे, सुनेंगे, और आई एम श्योर दैट आज का सेशन आपको बहुत मजेदार होगा. सर, वेलकम ऑन इंपीरियल मनी शोज.
Thank you, Deep. Thank you for the warm introduction. And, I'm looking forward to this session quite eagerly. It's been good to connect with you and good to understand your thoughts and some very interesting questions you have from your audience perspective. So very happy to be here and very happy to be able to throw some light on some of the questions which you have.
थैंक यू सर, थैंक यू वेरी मच. सो लेट्स स्टार्ट सर. हम लोग चालू करते हैं. सबसे पहला क्वेश्चन ये कि अभी आपको इस वक्त इंटरनेशनल इक्विटीज कैसे दिखती है? बिकॉज बाजार पूरे दुनिया के बहुत महंगे है. ओवरऑल कमेंट्री देखी जाए, ब्लॉग्स देखे जाए, आर्टिकल्स पढ़े जाए, सब तरफ ये है कि बाजार तो महंगे है. तो ऐसे बाजार में इंटरनेशनल इक्विटी आप कैसा देखते हैं? क्या वैल्यू प्रोपोजिशन बनता है?
So, जैसे आपने कहा, the markets have been trending very positively this entire year. They are at, from an index value at all-time highs, not necessarily from a price earning value. We will come to that discussion. But I think first and foremost, from an investor perspective, there's the old saying that timing the market is very difficult. It is time in the market rather than timing the market. तो कब एंट्री करनी है, कब एग्जिट करनी है, उसका जो टाइमिंग वाला जो सिचुएशन है, that is very, very difficult, and as a long-term investor, that is never recommended.
Right.
Because there one typically then ends, responding to fear and greed, and both are bad emotions.
Right.
Investment perspective. Having said that, while there are good tailwinds on why the markets are doing well, the post-COVID recovery is still ongoing.
Right.
Vaccination programs are still in progress. They have not been fully vaccinated. So we still haven't achieved full normalcy so far. Even if you look at the US or European markets where vaccination trends are stronger, they are now beginning to slowly ease up. And as they're easing up, they're seeing that the economy is picking up. They are seeing some supply-side constraints. So underneath all of this, there is good economic recovery happening. Companies from a cash flow and profitability perspective are reporting good results. And there are some very interesting sectors over there. So there is some basis for why equities are doing well, and in that context, for a long-term investor to invest, I think absolutely makes sense. The other interesting piece is now with the possibility to invest in the international markets. Of course, the Indian markets have done quite well this year. Actually, the US and India markets are probably the two best performing markets at this point in time, YTD. Europe then trails thereafter. Emerging markets have not done too well this year. If you kind of take out India as an exception. So this is also a good point point in time to think about from a global diversification perspective, because besides the economic recovery, The other thing is that the pace of innovation, when we think about it from a technology perspective and from some of the other sectors, whether that is from a clean energy, from electric mobility, from artificial intelligence, those innovations are actually picking up further pace.
Right.
And those innovations are predominantly happening in the developed markets.
Agree.
So this is a good time for people, who have seen good value coming from equity markets to take some exposure also to international markets, to think about some of the future themes where they can take positions today, which will help benefit them from a long-term perspective.
सो इसमें मुझे एक चीज और बताइए सर आप कि अगर मैं इमर्जिंग मार्केट्स में भी कुछ ऐसी कंट्रीज है जो कि बहुत इनोवेटिव है और फिर एक डेवलप मार्केट का बास्केट है जहां पे यूएस से लेके तो बाकी सारी कंट्रीज है बहुत जो बहुत डेवलप्ड है, आपका रैंकिंग अगर मैं बोलूं कि वैल्यू प्रोपोजिशन कहां बैठता है ज्यादा अच्छा आज के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में?
So, अगर हम इसको प्राइस अर्निंग एस्पेक्ट से देखें, so emerging markets broadly are at a price earning ratio of about 14.5, 14.7%. Then, if you think about this from a European perspective, Europe is, I think, around 17.5, 18%.
थोड़ा महंगा है,
थोड़ा ऊपर है. If you then think about the US is around 25 के आसपास. India is at about 26, 27.
Okay. So US is again comparatively bit expensive.
So on the price earning ratio,
basis.
it is still more expensive. But price earning ratio is one part of the equation.
Right.
Underneath, if you look at the earnings growth,
right,
the US companies are doing quite well.
Right.
And in that context, I would still feel that the US market is a very interesting market to stay focused on. I would think Europe is beginning to come out of that long period of the 20s,
right,
जहाँ पे inflation नहीं थी, growth नहीं थी. Europe is beginning to see some inflation. They are beginning to see some, supply side constraints. So one can be a little bit more positive on Europe.
right.
Emerging markets में, the thing is कि जो हमारे customers हैं, they by default have a large part of their portfolio in India. And by default, emerging market exposure आ जाता है. And if you look at it, typically between India and China, these are the two biggest weights in emerging markets.
Right.
And China is going through some, kind of hiccups at this point in time. They're trying to reset their system. So there are some risks over there which are hard to understand how they will shape up.
So, right.
So as I was saying, the customers have where they already have substantial India exposure and therefore they're already exposed to emerging markets. From a portfolio diversification perspective, US, I would still suggest is a good place to, also invest. One of the reasons I'm also bullish on the US is जो US companies हैं. आप ये जो बड़ी कंपनी सोचते हैं, चाहे Amazon है, चाहे Google है, चाहे Tesla है, Facebook है, जो भी बड़ी-बड़ी companies हैं, actually they are not only growing because US economy is growing. They are also growing because India is growing. They are also growing because emerging markets are growing because they are international and global companies. So Apple है, अब Apple का iPhone इंडिया में भी बिकता है, चाइना में भी बिकता है, कोरिया में भी बिकता है, मलेशिया में भी है, ऑस्ट्रेलिया में भी है.
Right.
So they will grow when these economies grow in any case. So from a diversification perspective, I would say first step is emerging market exposure बहुत है हमारे पास. उसको diversify करने के लिए let us add developed market exposure.
Right.
Developed market exposure starting with US first. And अगर US का exposure build up हो गया, if you want some satellite exposure, so one can think about Europe. That's the way I would think for an Indian investor. That's a good way to think about it.
So great. So, सर एक नेक्स्ट मेरा क्वेश्चन ये है कि अभी बहुत सारे इंटरनेशनल फंड्स अवेलेबल है और इट इंक्लूड थीम बेस्ड है, बहुत सारे ETFs अवेलेबल है, कंट्री स्पेसिफिक है. तो एक आम आदमी इंटरनेशनल स्टॉक को रिसर्च कैसा करे और वो कैसे या ग्लोबलाइज कैसे इस पूरे प्रोसेस को सिंप्लीफाइड करेगा, तो ये मैं चाहूंगा इसमें मतलब आप थोड़ा सा लोगों को बताएं.
नहीं, बिल्कुल ठीक बात है कि ये जो अपॉर्चुनिटी है इंटरनेशनल इन्वेस्टमेंट की, इस अपॉर्चुनिटी में इस वक्त बहुत इंटरेस्ट है। बहुत इंटरेस्ट है कस्टमर्स के पर्सपेक्टिव से, बहुत इंटरेस्ट है फ्रॉम अ प्रोवाइडर पर्सपेक्टिव। Now, clients, customers have two possibilities. One is indirect exposure through a fund of fund route.
Right.
उसमें कुछ limited options available आ जाती हैं because fund of funds है, उसमें उनको they have to think about कि क्या limited options construct कर सकते हैं, and then they have to think about it in the overall context. The other people have is to be directly present in the market where they want to invest in. And to invest in the international markets, for example, with platforms like Globalize, वहाँ पे direct capability है. You can buy, if you are interested in Apple, Google, you can buy Apple, Google. If you are interested in taking Europe exposure, you can take Europe exposure. The way we also simplify the investment process is, we create curated portfolios. We call them globes. So, for example, if there is an investor जो पहली बार US में invest कर रहा है, there, the first outlook is how do I get some broad US market exposure? S&P का भी हो जाए, Nasdaq का भी हो जाए, some mid cap, small cap, so it's kind of a core exposure.
Right.
So we have a globe which is a West generator globe, which gives broad US market exposure. So that's, I think, a good entry point. Then there are some very interesting possibilities, जैसे हम बात कर रहे थे कि there are some future themes, next gen technology है, clean energy है, biotechnology है. So we have researched and constructed portfolios which give people exposure to that theme. And उसमें क्या है कि we are researching, we are monitoring them, we rebalance. So that's a easy way where customers can then build exposure and get that exposure. So एक वो भी possibility बड़ी interesting हो जाती है लोगों के लिए.
So great. So this is the one thing जो आपने एकदम pre-designed customized portfolio लोगों को बना के दे दी, and then the people can buy those portfolios, right? मतलब as simple as
absolutely
it.
As simple as that, and वो single click investment है उसके
single click investment, yes.
And उसमें guidance भी available है through advisors के risk profile कैसा है, investment tenure कैसा है, उसके हिसाब से क्या portfolio ठीक रहेगा. So all of that guidance is available and provided.
So great. तो सर अभी आप आते हैं इस पॉइंट पे कि हाउ ग्लोबलाइज ने इस पूरी प्रोसेस को सिंप्लीफाइड कैसे किया, वो अगर थोड़ा बताए तो एक आम आदमी को समझ में आएगा कि कैसे वो ग्लोबलाइज के प्लेटफॉर्म के थ्रू, इंपीरियल के थ्रू ग्लोबलाइज से कनेक्ट होगा और ग्लोबलाइज से कनेक्ट होकर हाउ ही विल बी कनेक्टिंग टू द इंटरनेशनल मार्केट्स और कैसे वो पूरी प्रोसेस को सिंप्लीफाइड करेगा.
सो बहुत ही सिंपल प्रोसेस है. आप जाएं, अपना उस पर अकाउंट खोलें, आपका पैन चाहिए, आपका आधार कार्ड चाहिए, आपका नेम एड्रेस चाहिए. फ्रॉम अ US SEC पर्सपेक्टिव आपकी एम्प्लॉयमेंट इंफॉर्मेशन और आपका रिस्क प्रोफाइल चाहिए. विद इन अ मैटर ऑफ आवर्स आवर US टीम लुक्स एट दैट इंफॉर्मेशन. और सब डिजिटल है, सब ऑनलाइन है, कहीं कुछ कागज भेजने की जरूरत नहीं है, आपके घर बैठे बैठे हो जाता है. और आप एक्चुअली अपने क्लाइंट्स को सपोर्ट कर सकते हैं बिकॉज ये सब इंफॉर्मेशन आप प्रीफिल भी कर सकते हैं उनके लिए प्लेटफॉर्म पे, ताकि जो आपका कस्टमर है दे ओनली हैव टू सी, क्लिक एंड द इंफॉर्मेशन गेट सबमिटेड. तो वंस दैट डन इज डन, और जो एक बार KYC अप्रूव हो जाती है, उसके बाद द कस्टमर गेट्स in his own name a fully regulated US brokerage account. बहुत important बात है ये. This is a fully regulated, US government SPIC protected brokerage account in their own name.
Wow.
With that, क्या है कि it is like you are sitting in the US and you can do whatever anybody can do in the US.
Right.
अपने घर बैठे बैठे. आपने एप्पल खरीदना है, गूगल खरीदना है, पोर्टफोलियो खरीदना है, ETF खरीदना है, द होल वर्ल्ड इज ओपन फॉर यू नाउ. यू आर नॉट डिपेंडेंट कि कोई फंड बना के देगा, कुछ करेगा. आपके पास सारी चॉइस अवेलेबल है. The second, the other piece there is that some of the US stocks are of high value. अब जैसे Google है, it's $3,500. Every stock, therefore, if you buy $3,500 is $2.5 lakh का एक शेयर आता है. Now, what is possible on our platform is कि मेरे को 10,000 रुपए का gold खरीदना है. You can buy fractional shares. Right.
Yeah.
So you say, अच्छा, I want to invest 5 lakh rupees in the beginning, and I want to buy Apple for 1 lakh, Google for 1 lakh. I want to buy Tesla for 50,000. It is possible.
Wow.
So एक ये और एडवांटेज है आपके पास कि आप जो आपका पोर्टफोलियो आप वहाँ पे बनाना चाहते हैं, आप प्रिसाइज एलोकेशन कर सकते हैं. You don't have to worry about कि अंडरलाइंग शेयर प्राइस क्या है. जो फंड्स ट्रांसफर प्रोसेस है from the India account to the US account, it's we have tie-ups already with 6 banks. ICICI है, Kotak है, Axis Bank है, IndusInd Bank है, IDFC First है. तो इन सब के साथ ऑनलाइन है, आप $25,000 in a single transaction कभी भी ट्रांसफर कर सकते हैं. So आपका अकाउंट खुल गया, आपके फंड्स ट्रांसफर हो गए, you have direct access. It's 24/7. So all of that guidance is available because we specialize in cross-border overseas markets. So from a research perspective, from an input perspective, all of that is available. And then the next thing is that we want to encourage people. Therefore, there are no entry barriers. There is no minimum investment amounts. The fees is quite low on the platform. So the idea is to encourage people as they add money to the platform. So there are a number of advantages and benefits.
Wow. So अभी अकाउंट तो बन गया सर, बट अभी एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट चीज आती है, मतलब पूरी दुनिया में एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट चीज जो है वो इट्स कॉल्ड एज अ क्रेडिबिलिटी. So certainly, like Global is a platform which you build it, but why and what is the authenticity that the saving money of the Indian investor will be safe? What kind of credibility we carry, और ये कैसे exactly Globalize पे बैंक अपॉन करे, ये पैसा कैसे जाता है, कैसे रूट आउट होता है, कैसे वापस अगर उनको लेना है तो वो कैसे आता है, प्लेटफॉर्म के कौन से प्लेटफॉर्म के साथ आपने Globalize के प्लेटफॉर्म को कनेक्ट किया हुआ है, and what sort of again the transparency we are maintaining in this?
ये बहुत ही I think from a customer perspective बहुत ही important question है. And इसमें जो connectivity है system के अंदर, so जैसे मैंने कहा था that when the customers open the account, the account actually gets opened with the US SEC regulated broker. The name of the broker is Drive Wealth. So आपका account वहाँ पे है, आपके सारे पैसे वहाँ पे हैं, और आपकी सारी सिक्योरिटीज वहाँ पे हैं. सिक्योरिटीज की कस्टडी इज विद Citibank in the US. So when you think about this from a money flow perspective, आप अपने बैंक पे गए, बैंक से पैसा आपने भेजा US में the money goes to the bank of Drive Wealth, which is M&T Bank, और वहाँ से it goes into Drive Wealth, वहाँ से आपके अकाउंट में चले जाता है. आपने वहाँ पे इन्वेस्टमेंट, आपने वहाँ पे उसके बाद शेयर्स खरीदे, that is directly done on the NYSE or the Nasdaq, जहाँ से आपने शेयर खरीदा. Direct settlement is happening, securities are in your account and cash is in your account. And when you want to withdraw the money back, आप प्लेटफॉर्म पे गए, आपने कहा I want my money back or some part of my money back. आपके ड्राइवर्स का जो आपका ब्रोकरेज अकाउंट है वहाँ पे कैश है, वहाँ से ड्राइवर्स का बैंक जो है वो आपको बैंक को पैसे भेजता है और पैसे आपके अकाउंट में आ जाते हैं. So in this entire process, the money and the securities are always in a regulated environment with regulated entities. The other very important thing is that the US system is a very, very robust system from a governance perspective. And therefore, every individual account, because it is a US regulated account on the Globalized platform, is protected for $500,000. So whatever, 3.5 crores plus, 3.7 crores की जो वैल्यू है, आपके जो कैश और सिक्योरिटीज हैं they are covered by the US government. So from a regulated structure perspective, from a government protection, so from all perspectives, it is very open, very transparent. आपकी month end statement आएंगी, month end statement में आपको सीधा आपके US broker से आती हैं. So it's and for people who are interested to check, you can check on the US government website. You can check about dry wells. You can so all kinds of possibilities are there. But I just want to assure people that their money is carrying market risk, but otherwise उनको चिंता नहीं करनी चाहिए.
Oh, great. तो सर इसमें जैसे ग्लोबलाइज में व्हाट काइंड ऑफ पीपल आर इन्वॉल्व्ड, और इफ समथिंग लेट्स से ऐसा होगा नहीं, बट मैं एकदम कॉमन क्वेश्चन है, इफ समथिंग गोज रॉन्ग विद द ग्लोबलाइजेशन, हाउ द पीपल वुड बी हैविंग द मनी बैक इन देयर बैंक अकाउंट इफ दे वांट दैट?
So if something was to happen to Globalize, let us say for some reason Globalize was to get acquired by some company, or Globalize was, let us say for example Globalize did not exist.
Yeah.
आपका जो पैसा है और आपकी securities हैं, they are with a regulated US broker, which is DriveWell. The first step that will happen is to work out whether instead of Globalize, is there some other platform जहाँ पे you would like to migrate your account.
All right. तो मतलब ग्लोबलाइज से आपको एचडीएफसी में जाना है क्या, आईसीआईसी में जाना है क्या, किसी और ब्रोकर के थ्रू में? इट इज जैसा इंडिया में होता है वैसे ही आपने अपना, अगर ग्लोबलाइज के साथ अकाउंट नहीं रखना है, आपने ट्रांसफर करना है, आपने ट्रांसफर कर दिया अपना अकाउंट. अगर आपको लगता है कि आपको यूएस एक्सपोजर नहीं चाहिए, तो आप सिक्योरिटीज बेच के आप पैसे वापस लेके आ सकते हैं. और यूएस में बड़ा सिंपल प्रोसेस है. देयर इज ऑटोमेटिक, इट्स कॉल्ड ए कैट्स प्रोसेस, जहाँ पे आप अपना अकाउंट एक ब्रोकर से दूसरे ब्रोकर पे आप शिफ्ट करवा सकते हैं. राइट.
And so it's a very straightforward process. So the fact that Globalize is not in the picture doesn't in any way jeopardize any of your cash or securities which you have, because they stay in a regulated environment.
Sorry. So sir, what kind of people are actually involved to Globalize? थोड़ा सा Globalize के बारे में बताइए ना.
So Globalize की जो टीम है, आपने तो खैर दीप देखा ही होगा कि if I just talk about the people, you've spoken about my background. We all come from a financial services background. Viraj, who is the CEO, studied in the US. He was with Deutsche Bank on the investment banking side, involved with fintechs. जो हमारे chief technology officer हैं, Sridhar Kakareza, comes from the industry. He was with JP Morgan and GE, and उसके बाद इंडिया में काफी फिनटेक के CIO थे 8 साल से. So he's there. जो हमारे head of research हैं राम, so he comes with about 15 years of fund management experience with a US fund manager. तो उनका वो experience है. We have a very strong advisory board. Karan Datta is helping us shape our product. Then there are a few people you can again see on the website. Sandeep Kapoor is there, comes from a legal background. Arun Kamath hai compliance ke liye, ex-Reserve Bank of India. Then he was also with Deutsche Bank for a long period of time. So from a compliance perspective, technology perspective, legal, business perspective, we have a strong advisory board. All the team which we have comes with a strong financial services background. So yeah, I think we know what we're doing.
Very strong team is there. All right.
Absolutely.
Good. So एक चीज और सर बहुत important जो है, the most important in India में financial literacy is far quite lower than compared to the US or the other markets. वैसे ट्रेडिंग अकाउंट ओपन नहीं होते हैं. जो ओपन हो रहे हैं अभी, जो चल रहा है, या ऑप्शंस के जो ट्रेडिंग के वॉल्यूम्स है, या फिर जीरोडा या बाकी स्टेट के जो जितने भी प्लेटफॉर्म कर रहे हैं, तो लोग कैसे ट्रेड कर रहे हैं ये अपने को समझता है. सो मुझे ये समझना है आपसे कि how you look at the market in India for the US perspective or the international perspective, and what kind of opportunity and the volumes you're looking for, and how that financial literacy for the US markets you wanted to inculcate in this particular domain, because you are the first company, I believe, which is coming on a very upfront, the very thought process of to offer the international equities there.
So the interesting thing is कि ये थोड़ी इंडिया में इस वक्त यूनिक बात है कि पीपल थिंक अच्छा मैं इंडिया में इन्वेस्ट कर रहा हूँ, मेरे को बाहर करना चाहिए कि नहीं करना चाहिए. If you are in European or US market, लोग ऐसा सोचते नहीं है. मतलब by default your thinking is international because nobody wants to stay domestically limited. But हम domestically limited क्यों रहे हैं? मतलब आप इंडिया को भी देखो, इंडिया की despite the run market cap is about 3.5 trillion. Right. Which is not even 1/10 of the US market cap.
Agree.
So the fact कि ये हम सोच रहे हैं ऐसा is somewhat of a historical limitation because we were limited कि हम पैसे बाहर भेज नहीं सकते थे invest करने के लिए. Now that has opened up over the last 3-4 years. Reserve Bank is becoming more liberal. So now I think by default people will think about कि मतलब मेरे को अपना investment करना है, the world is my stage. तो मैं कहाँ पे इन्वेस्ट करूँ? Because as somebody told me once, he says, except जो मैं खाना खाता हूँ, मैं कपड़े पहनता हूँ, जूते पहनता हूँ, गाड़ी चलाता हूँ, लैपटॉप यूज करता हूँ, फोन यूज करता हूँ, सोशल मीडिया यूज करता हूँ, सब कंपनी इंडियन नहीं है.
Agree.
ठीक है. But historically I've not invested in these companies. So I think one is for people to begin to understand and appreciate that from an investment perspective, being limited in just a small geography or a limited geography is not the normal thing to do. And now we have the opportunity to actually own the brands we use and to own some part of the companies we like to use and we believe in that these are important. So I think that's one part of it. दूसरा है कि हम इसको कैसे आगे और पॉपुलराइज करें. आप देखेंगे कि फॉर आवर कस्टमर्स, फॉर आवर पार्टनर्स वी आर डूइंग वेबिनार्स. कस्टमर्स के लिए हमने ब्लॉग्स स्टार्ट किए हुए हैं, कुछ न्यूज़लेटर स्टार्ट किए हुए हैं. वी आर थिंकिंग अबाउट webinars for customers. So in terms of literacy, in terms of awareness के जो markets हैं, markets में क्या हो रहा है, वहाँ पे sectors में क्या हो रहा है, so where people are interested to encourage to do those themes. Then there is another interesting perspective that there are people who actually have need for money overseas. काफी लोग हैं वो सोचते हैं कि हमने अपने बच्चों को बाहर भेजना है पढ़ने के लिए. कहीं लोग एमिग्रेशन की बात सोच रहे हैं, कहीं कुछ रियल एस्टेट के बारे में सोच रहे हैं. So when you think about those people, so अच्छा to have then the opportunity कि अच्छा हम पैसे डॉलर्स में इन्वेस्ट करेंगे बिकॉज 4-5 साल बाद हमारे को चाहिए डॉलर्स ही चाहिए इन्वेस्ट करने के लिए. So that's another segment. The other thing is कि आपके कुछ और at least for some of our partners, उनके कस्टमर्स नॉन रेजिडेंट इंडियंस हैं. अभी तक उनके साथ जो उनकी इंडिया लिक्विडिटी थी उस पर फोकस कर रहे थे. बट इस वक्त अगर आपके कस्टमर्स जो हैं कुछ नॉन रेजिडेंट्स हैं, अब वो आपके साथ डोमेस्टिक भी काम कर सकते हैं, इंटरनेशनल भी काम कर सकते हैं. सो दे हैव अ वन स्टॉप शॉप जहाँ पे उनको टोटल पोर्टफोलियो उनका देख के उनको एडवाइस मिल सकता है कि कैसे उसको इन्वेस्ट करना है. सो व्हेन यू थिंक नॉलेज अपॉर्चुनिटी and
so एक और क्वेश्चन सर मेरा ये कि with this account can the people invest into the emerging markets also or it's only limited to the US market?
तो इसमें 2-3 बातें हैं. एक तो you are investing from a US brokerage account. US के अंदर आप 2 चीजें कर सकते हैं. One is that a lot of the large international companies are all listed in the US also, including Indian companies are also listed in the US. So you can buy that. The other thing is that you can actually buy ETFs. So from US, if I want to invest in India, there's, for example, an iShares MSCI India ETF, which is fully dedicated to India. तो आपको अगर चाइना एक्सपोजर चाहिए, जापान एक्सपोजर चाहिए, आपको यूरोप का स्पेसिफिक कंट्री एक्सपोजर चाहिए, आपको ब्रॉड इमर्जिंग मार्केट एक्सपोजर चाहिए, all of that is possible from the platform. In fact, on our platform, on Globalize itself, we have a emerging market portfolio. We have a globe because some people have said कि हमारे को globe में हमारे को emerging market exposure चाहिए. So we've created a portfolio which we think is the best possible investment profile from an emerging market perspective.
Wow.
आजकल क्या हो रहा है कि लोग कह रहे हैं अच्छा बिटकॉइन में बहुत इंटरेस्ट आ रहा है, सो लोग कह रहे हैं कि बिटकॉइन में कैसे इन्वेस्ट कर सकते हैं. Now, there are different perspectives in terms of risk and volatility, and in my view, Bitcoin is a very volatile asset. It's a very risky asset. So people have to be very conscious. But if people say कि अच्छा मैं 2-4% उसमें इन्वेस्ट करूंगा, अगर डाउनसाइड हो गया तो कोई बात नहीं, बट अपसाइड में अपसाइड हो सकता है. Some people, have that kind of. So we are also trying to work. How do we give exposure? One of our next gen portfolios actually has a 1% Bitcoin exposure, but some people want more concentrated Bitcoin exposure.
Oh, great.
We are also working on products जहाँ पे people can have more concentrated Bitcoin exposure.
Wow.
So बहुत interesting possibilities हैं इसमें.
So amazing. जाते जाते सर एक लास्ट लाइन आपके तरफ से या लास्ट सेंटेंस या फ्यू वर्ड्स अगेन that what are the 3 powerful important things for which the people really should think about. लोगों ने इंटरनेशनल इक्विटीज के बारे में सोचना है. 3 पावरफुल चीज.
So I think first thing is ये आप भी जानते हैं कि diversification is important.
First, diversification.
Concentration in a single geography, single company, single asset class is not good because जब ठीक है तो ठीक है, और जब कुछ प्रॉब्लम आती है तो you can be in a lot of difficulty.
Right.
And and sometimes समझ में नहीं आता है कि वो situation change कब होगी.
Right.
So आप ये नहीं कह सकते कि मैं concentrated रहूंगा, but I will be able to react in time. अब आप ये देखिए कि सामने 10 दिन में अफगानिस्तान की सिचुएशन चेंज हो गई. अब उसका क्या इम्पैक्ट आएगा, we don't know.
बराबर.
So इसलिए to keep the portfolio diversified is fundamentally important.
Right.
And उस diversification में becomes important. So that's most important.
Right.
Second, कि क्या करना चाहिए. राय मिल जाए, and if some expertise is available to help guide you in the investment process, then that is always valuable. Which is why our belief that working with wealth managers is a good, because वो आपको राय भी ठीक देते रहेंगे, आपका पोर्टफोलियो कैसे डाइवर्सिफाई होना, restructuring is as markets change. So that's the other thing. Work with people and platforms where you get some guidance, some advice, so on a ongoing way to manage a portfolio. Which is why our focus very much is also working with partners, because we feel that customers को advice मिलना चाहिए. So that's the second part of this construct. And I think the third part is, think about it from a longer term perspective, think about it from systematic investing, time in market versus timing the market. I think that is because बहुत events होते हैं. A lot of people last year got worried जब COVID आया था, but markets have reacted differently. A lot of people are now worried कि markets are too high. So जो हमारा पहली बात हुई थी कि markets are too high, I think that time in market versus timing the market is important. Have a steady mind, keep building the portfolio, and that is a good way to achieve financial security and to achieve financial goals. So वो थोड़ा एक discipline important है. कई लोगों को फिर भी interest होता है, and some people are adventurous, and that's all fine. And that is actually in some ways good, because that is for some people that is the way they like to invest. I would always in that case suggest के एक core portfolio होना चाहिए, एक satellite portfolio होना चाहिए. Core portfolio में look at it from an investment perspective. अपने satellite portfolio में you can do the experimentation you want, but don't be in a situation जहाँ पे अगर कुछ drawdown आए और आपको उस बात का stress हो जाए. So I would say diversify, make sure you have good guidance, and stay focused in terms of asset allocation and long-term investing.
So right, sir. Nanda sir, thank you very much for visiting on the show, Imperial Money channel, and I'm sure that a lot many people will going to get the huge benefit out of the knowledge what you carry and the kind of information which you shared with us on the channel. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Deep. Thank you for having me on the channel. Thank you.
Thank you.